and welcome to the A to Z Sports Big Orange Podcast. I'm Charlie Burris. That is Zach Reagan. Wherever you listen throughout the world, we thank you for listening to us. We talk everything Vols every week here on the Big Orange Podcast. And if that's something you want to listen to on the regular, go over to the A to Z Sports Podcast Network feed on Apple or Spotify. When you get there, rate, review, but you got to subscribe. If you do subscribe, you won't miss our shows when we drop them on Mondays. And speaking of Mondays, it is one right now at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, which means we are live on YouTube. And speaking of YouTube, you got to go to the A to Z Sports Tennessee Volunteers YouTube channel, where you can see this show. You can see Lucas Panzica's explainer videos. You can see clips from our show that we put up, our posts that we put on there. It's the whole thing. Go over there, subscribe, but you got to hit that notification bell, and then you'll be notified when we go live. You won't miss these, and you can come in here, be a part of the show. You can be like Gilead, Tennessee over here. He says already in the comments, I like this show because Charlie and Zach have red beards, just like myself. Go Big Orange. Yes, sir. GBO to GBO7751 also. Thank you for watching and tuning in. At Charlie_Burris, at Zach TNT, at A to Z Sports, Facebook.com/A to Z Sports Nashville, and A to Z Sports.com for everything that Zach writes on the internet. Zach, Craig, and the whole crew over there putting up content constantly. And there has been plenty to write about lately, as is perpetually the case with Tennessee sports. There's always something to talk about. And thankfully, that has, I guess, in recent years, that's shifted from a complete nightmare scenario with your Butch Joneses, your Derek Dooleys, your Jeremy Pruitts, and everything that happened with those clowns, over to the transfer portal and all of the absolute insanity that is that circus. And we're going to talk about it all in tonight's show. Zach, what is up, man?
Yeah, just sitting here thinking about how I can work out some content to propose a Joe Milton to the Tennessee Titans trade, because clearly after that performance yesterday, that's going to be the talk of the offseason about how Joe Milton played. But just one game, nothing to get too excited about. But he really helped out the Titans by winning that game.
It did feel like kind of like the Clemson game, and he's throwing bombs, and Tennessee beats Clemson in the Orange Bowl. Holy cow, it's the guy of the future. Not so fast. Not so fast, my friend. Really like Joe Milton a lot. A really, really good kid. Let's see him do it week over week. I mean, he's not going to have a chance now because the Patriots are, what is that, their fourth win of the season, I think. It took them out of the first pick.
It took him all the way down to like number 4 or 5, maybe. So
because he had a good performance.
They were playing an in-division team, the Buffalo Bills, that had nothing to play for. So you got to wonder if they didn't mind seeing their division rivals get knocked down a few spots in the draft.
As weird as it is to say, as a longtime Titans fan, I don't know why I do it to myself. What a torture that's been this season and for many years in the past. But hey, they got the number 1 pick. They tanked it all the way to the top. They sucked so bad that they get that top pick, and they're going to take
I don't know.
Ward. I don't know, man.
That's going to be an interesting conversation all off season, how that draft plays out.
Yeah. Well, and you can tune into all the other stuff on A to Z Sports for that conversation here. This is not your destination for that. As I mentioned, tonight we're going to talk all about the latest transfer portal updates. I put it in the name of the show. The transfer portal situation is ridiculous for Tennessee and for kind of everybody else too. But we're going to break down the Mike Matthews stuff, the Branch Brothers stuff, and all everything else. Everybody that Tennessee has lost, and then finally, I'm really excited about this. We're going to get to do an entire segment on basketball. They played the first SEC game, huge game against Florida coming up tomorrow. We're going to, do the whole spiel on basketball finally, hopefully men's basketball and women's too. Women's undefeated until Sunday when they lost barely to Oklahoma. We'll break it all down, and we'll do that all right after I tell you about the good folks at Zen Sports. Zen Sports just had another grand prize winner last month, and then they are running it back yet again with the VIP Players Club sweepstakes in January, and the prizes are raised to an entire new level. This month, one grand prize winner will win a $10,000 bonus bet on the NFL big game in February and $10,000 cash, or an alternative prize of $15,000 cash. You have the ability to earn entries on every bet you place on Zen Sports in January and every dollar that you wager. Plus, you can earn 10 times the entries on all parlay bets. It doesn't get better than this. If you don't win the grand prize, don't worry. You'll also have a shot to win one of 5 smaller prizes that grant you either $1,000 bonus bet on the big game or $250 cash. Also, for all new customers who sign up with the code A2ZTN, that is ATOZTN, you'll receive 500 entries in addition to the entries earned from the value of your qualifying bets. What are you waiting for? Head to zensports.com/sweepstakes for a full list of rules. You can also earn the $100 no danger first wager that we've been talking to you about all season. That is Zen Sports. Betting just got better. If you have a gambling problem, call 1-800-889-9789. Donate your wager limited to plus 500 odds to qualify. Terms and conditions apply. A qualifying wager for a wager entry must have minimum odds for any leg of minus 250 American odds or worse. For clarity, a wager of minus 251 does not qualify. It's a qualifying wager for a wager entry must be a minimum of $5. Head to zensports.com/sweepstakes for all terms and conditions. Must be 21 or older in Tennessee to bet. Zen Sports. All righty. The transfer portal has been ridiculous for all of college football, and Tennessee has been one of the most ridiculous situations, unfortunately. Zach and I were, before the show started, we were trying to calculate how many guys had jumped into the portal for Tennessee. We listed them all off. It's like 15-ish. Might not have that right on the number, but it's too many, and they have gotten exactly one guy, Wendell Moe. Heard somebody call him Moe.
I think it is. I think that might be, yeah.
So Wendell Moe from Arizona, offensive lineman, good pickup. But you were you've been involved in some situations like, was it Josh Thompson from Northwestern, who's a very, a top offensive line recruit, and he's picked to go to Tennessee, gets sniped by LSU. You don't get him. Zachariah Branch, supposedly the news comes out, Tennessee is going to take a big swing at Zachariah Branch, the wide receiver out of USC. Big swing at him and his brother because they're a package deal, apparently. Well, they're both going to Georgia. So, fat chance there. You hear Tennessee is in the final 3 for Malik Benson out of Florida State, who, if you're asking me, is not like the world's most prized transfer portal pickup, but would be a nice depth piece at the very least for your wide receiver room. And the news around that is that it's kind of like Tennessee's not really that interested. So
Oregon probably.
Yeah. And I don't know. How are you feeling about the transfer portal with Tennessee right now, Zach?
Oh, there's just all kinds of feelings about it that going in every which direction. You start with the guys that you're losing. The big news obviously is getting Mike Matthews to stay. That was massive. That's as big of a win as anything. And it we had to go through that whole saga and it drug out a week, but it goes back to that thing what we said last week is you got to give the coaching staff credit for the guys they keep, just like last season when you never heard anything about James Pierce and some other guys. Even if you do hear about the Matthews stuff and it was a thing, you kept him. And that's really what matters. That's a guy that you needed to keep for 2025 because he's a talented kid and could be a future NFL player and could be your top guy. We were begging for him all season and going to get to see him in a featured role next season. But outside of that, the guys that you've lost, Squirrel White, I like Squirrel White. It's a tough loss, I think, for your depth and the fact that he knows the offense, but it's probably not a future NFL player. Not the type of guy that you're going to go toe-to-toe with Ohio State, right? Like you saw their 3 wide receivers. Squirrel's not seeing the field at Ohio State. And to beat those kind of teams, you got to have that kind of talent. So you lose some guys like that, Caleb Webb, Chaz Nimrod, depth guys, some guys that you would like to keep around, like Jason Jenkins, the defensive lineman that's going to Florida State. I think he's a good player. I think he would have played more next season as you're losing a couple of defensive linemen. Coach has praised him last offseason. Players, his teammates praised him. So there's guys that you would like to keep, but it's just such a weird world now where, like the Josh Thompson thing, you can target some of these offensive linemen in some of these positions like that where if they don't see a immediate opening, they're not going to come to Tennessee at that point. And you've got Lance Hurd penciled in. You've got David Sanders penciled in. Karich is coming back, we believe. You got him penciled in. So it's such a tough world to navigate because players want this clear path, and I kind of get it. But at the same time, that's really not what the competitive aspect of the sport's all about. I mean, you got to go earn your spot, right? I mean, that's ultimately what it comes down to. I don't care how much money you pay somebody, you got to go earn that spot. It's just not the selling point anymore. And I don't think Tennessee at certain positions can sell that. Like when it comes to Zachariah Branch and his brother Zion Branch, would have been great to get them. Tennessee wanted to get them. They didn't really want to come visit, and maybe that's because, Mike Matthews is going back there, and you've got Chris Brazzell there still, and Braylon Staley probably playing in the slot. Yeah, I mean, you could go beat those guys out, but, Georgia needs receivers. You saw the drops they had against Notre Dame in the playoff and how that impacted their offense. That's, hey, we need you. We're a couple of receivers away from competing for a championship is kind of their message. So you're competing with stuff like that, and when you see some of the offensive struggles Tennessee had, there's some negative recruiting going back and forth. It's such a mess, and it's really, really hard to navigate. And when you do it the way Tennessee does, where you're thinking about your culture, you're thinking about the fit, they do a good job, I think, of identifying transfer players and bringing in players that can make an impact. And we were talking about this before the show. You see all these guys hitting the portal. There's not suddenly more impact players available. Just because a guy was a 4-star recruit doesn't mean he's going to come and suddenly light it up at your program. There's only so many elite, high-level players available in college football, and not that many of them are really hitting the portal. There's a few every year that do, and there are bidding wars that people get into right off the bat for some of those players, and some of those players transfer, especially the quarterbacks. But some of those players transfer, and they make a huge impact for their new school. I mean, Ole Miss benefited several of the players they picked up, like Walter Nolan and guys like that. But for the most part, I don't want to use the word retread, but it's just these guys are bouncing back and forth, kind of looking for a paycheck in some of these instances where they're not necessarily going to make a huge impact. So it's really difficult to go sift through all that and find the Jermod McCoy from Oregon State. Like, we didn't know that guy was going to be as good as he was. It's a really good job by Tennessee's staff to identify that guy as a talented player that could play in the SEC, and they were right. Like, they nailed that one. But for every Jermod McCoy coming from Oregon State, there's 10 other players coming from an Oregon State or a California or Stanford or Northwestern, wherever, they're just not going to make that big of an impact in the SEC or some of these big name schools. So it's tough. It's a tough thing, and you want to go chase the big names and you want to make these huge additions, but it's just really hard to do. And Tennessee's trying to keep the guys on their roster happy. They want to keep that high school talent. I mean, that's how you really build a program. All three of Ohio State's receivers, right, like signed out of high school. I know Smith and Tate did. I think Ibuka did as well. That's the way to build an elite program still, is through that high school recruiting and then managing to keep them on your roster and supplementing that. And you only get so many swings at these transfer players. And if you swing big and miss on 5 or 7 of them, you spend a lot of money for nothing. So you got to be real sure when you bring these guys in.
It has to be both. It has to be the top-notch recruiting out of high school. That's a given, and everyone would say that. And it has to be the transfer portal. Ole Miss is a prime example. Did they get really good portal players and some of them were hits? Yes, 100%. And then they lost to Kentucky on their home field and missed the playoff. So
yeah, they still didn't get the playoff, and that was huge thing for them.
And that could be the function of coaching, and I think a lot of people would argue that is the case. But
their quarterback disappearing in big moments, I would say.
Yes, yeah, Jackson Dart. He's coming back. Well, congrats. The guy melts down at the biggest moments constantly. I mean, You saw it in the absolute biggest moments. And so it's not just some surefire thing like, oh, we got all these huge transfer guys. Well, this is unequivocally true, and you touched on it there. A lot of these guys, some of them are transferring just for a paycheck, and some of them are transferring for a reason, if you know what I mean. Like they weren't getting playing time for a reason of where they were playing, and there's, as you're saying, you have to sift through all of those factors and figure out, is this kid Jermon McCoy or is this kid going to be a bust? And because we have a finite amount of dollars and
roster spots.
And Rod, that's true. And both. And so obviously I still think at the end of the day, ideally you want it to be guys that you recruited out of high school and that you develop up. And that, if you have to quote unquote, like Mike Matthews, if you have to sign them to a new deal, so to speak, like if that's what it is now, fine. Because it's good to keep those dudes around. I mean, you saw William says it in the comments here. He said, what about the wide receiver from Alabama? Amari Jefferson from Alabama is currently predicted to come to Tennessee. We'll see if that sticks. The kid from Northwestern was predicted to come to Tennessee.
I think Jefferson he probably will. I mean, he's
a local kid.
Flipped to Tennessee as a recruit, and the Saban was there, and there's a lot going on there. And he didn't play at Alabama this past year. I don't even think he took a snap as a true freshman, which is that's not a red flag or anything. But again, he's a talented player. We'll see how he contributes. You really have no idea until you see them on a Saturday in October and September.
Yeah, and he, in reality, a situation like that, because he's Chattanooga? I think he's a Chattanooga kid. I mean, that situation, if he chooses Tennessee, ultimately is gonna be like you recruited him out of high school. Because first of all, you did. And then he basically redshirted. I mean, he had a redshirt year. He hasn't gone somewhere and become a known commodity like a Jermon McCoy who goes to Oregon State and has an awesome season. And you get to sort of see how that panned out on a college football field. You don't get that. So really, it is sort of like just having a redshirt kid on your roster who has potential. That would be a good pickup. I like the offensive lineman they got from Arizona. He has a lot of D1 reps under his belt, but he was a 3-star guy. He's not super highly rated. Hopefully he can come in. If he can be like an Andre Karich. I mean, Andre Karich on some of these games, he was your best guy on that offensive line.
And that's a guy that you took, and he played, he missed some games in 23, but off the bat, we're like, oh, we're not, this guy, did you miss on him? He wasn't super impressive, but you forget, like, it takes a little bit of time. I mean, I know there's some instant impact guys that happen, but it takes time, and that's why the portal can be kind of deceptive too, because if it's a one and done, you might not, maybe he needs 2 years to really thrive in your program. And Karich is a great example of that. I mean, he really came on and played extremely well at times in 2024.
And I mean, Lord knows Tennessee needs offensive line help. Jared said UT needs more OL and DL, if any are out there. Mr. Jones, he guesses Tennessee may be waiting till the playoff teams that are left finish and have some portal entries. Maybe. In fact, probably. I mean, for sure, I would guess they're gonna see what options are there and weigh that. But I think that, I don't want to say Tennessee got caught asleep at the wheel somewhat here. I do think they did a little bit, though. I think maybe it was at the playoff. And going and preparing for a game that ultimately you got your head smashed in. But I think it was some of that, the Mike Matthews situation. Thankfully, you got him back. But I think if Mike Matthews left, I think they would have just gotten caught with their pants down. And it would have been kind of a desperate situation. Because I don't think, from the stuff that I saw, they didn't think they were losing Mike Matthews. And then that became a whole deal and a distraction from everything. And it does feel like they've gotten caught looking a little bit here. We'll see. It's still, relatively speaking, still a little early in the whole transfer portal thing. But a lot of guys are getting taken. Your Zachariah Branches. I mean, they're coming off the board.
I mean, you think got to do something. That Branch situation with Matthews, I think that's a good point. I think it really clouded that situation on every side, from coaches, from Matthews, and the Branches. Like, if you're Tennessee, do you want to try to like really get this guy in for a visit? And we don't know how hard they tried to get. I think they wanted Branch if they could get him. Sounded like he chose not to come visit. how hard did they push for that visit, knowing that you haven't resolved the Matthews deal yet? Then once it finally did get resolved, Friday, I mean, that thing drug out for way longer than we thought it would. We thought it'd be done by like last Monday, and then it kept getting pushed back. The branches commit on Sunday, after they've taken a couple of visits. They weren't waiting around. They were ready to go. They were happy to go to Georgia, so you never really got a chance to make a big impact on them. And then they're wondering about the Matthews situation. Like, all that probably did impact that to some extent. I'm not saying Tennessee would have got them, but if you get them on campus, who knows? Who knows what happens from there? Nothing's really real until you get a player on campus anyway, on both sides. It's like when you see, Tennessee's interested in such and such player, well, that could just be a text has been sent. And it's like, just kind of like, hey, would you have any interest in us? We have interest in you, maybe, but you don't really know if it's a fit or how interested they are till the player gets on campus and you get to see them in your culture and in your building. That's when things get real. So anything before that is just kind of like, it's like a pre-approval for a loan, right? It's like you're going in just to kind of test the waters, and then we'll see if things work out once we go through all the credit checks and all the paperwork.
Well, and we haven't even touched that much on the minutia of the Mike Matthews situation. Why it was such a distraction? We talked about it last week. He, on the last Saturday back a week at midnight and 15 minutes, it comes out that, he's plans to go into the transfer portal. Then there's all the silence, the longest 48 hours anyone's ever experienced. It was supposed to be 2 days. It ended up being 6 days of just waiting. And we kind of said on the show, and it ended up being the correct prediction. We sort of said, the longer this draws out, it feels like it's in Tennessee's favor, because you just feel like if this kid was going to jump, you'd just you'd hear about it. Like,
you don't want to waste time.
Right.
The branches out there, you want to go get your spot if you're going to go.
Yeah, like, what would the point be in waiting? And then ultimately he comes back, and the reporting around that was that some of the talks that he had with Tennessee staff were, hey, buddy, you better give me the football. But not just that. There was some wrapped up in making sure the offensive line is shored up for Nico, so that Nico can operate better, and that there's just more of an emphasis on being more dynamic on offense. And that's really interesting. Obviously, that sort of stuff that you hear from local reporters, you don't know how much stock to put into it, because obviously, they probably weren't sitting in the room when these conversations happened. It's probably, this kid's dad, maybe the kid himself is relaying it, something like that. But that's very interesting to me that supposedly, according to the reporting, that Tennessee's players are pushing the coaches to change offensively. That's kind of fascinating to me. And I wonder if that actually happens, and in what form does that take? I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, it sounds like that was, the situation. All the reporting is that it had really nothing to do with money, and there's been no mention of a new deal. I mean, he posted a photo like from his recruiting visit to Instagram yesterday, I think. I tweeted like kind of his official announcement that he's returning, and it wasn't like a Vol Club deal or anything like that we saw from Boo Carter, which was pretty interesting. But I mean, with the offense, you've heard all these kind of things from the Matthews deal, a little bit with the Nico stuff, the fans, media. I mean, everybody saw that the offense hasn't been as explosive the last 2 years, since Golish left, since Hendon Hooker left, since Jalen Hyatt left. And clearly it needs to be. I mean, that's what's going to win you. That's what's going to beat Ohio State. Like, your defense has to play well. It's got to play better than it did against Ohio State. I mean, Ohio State's just playing really, really well right now. So, they blew out Oregon. That makes Tennessee fans probably feel a little bit better about what happened in Columbus. But you got to be able to go, touchdown for touchdown with these guys too. So you're going to have to adjust the offense to some extent. We've heard it from too many different coaches and players of other teams this season. We heard it from Arkansas. We heard it from Georgia. We heard it from Ohio State. That there were things that they recognized on film that made it easier to stop Tennessee. And I know that's part of the deal. Like, everybody's watching film and you're picking up tendencies. But it seemed like with Tennessee, it was just this drastic change once you've seen this same offense in the SEC for a couple of years. And I don't think that's anything to panic about. Like, if you coach long enough, you're going to have to adapt, evolve. You mentioned it a couple of weeks ago. Nick Saban went through this early on or his middle tenure there at Alabama in the middle 2010s, 2012, 13, 14, when he brought Lane Kiffin in. You've got to evolve. You've got to adapt. And I think Heupel knows that as well as anyone. He's been in this sport for a quarter century now. Like, he's seen a ton of changes come to the sport, to the way defenses play. You've got to trust that. But I think seeing it 2 years in a row probably is like, okay, yeah, we got to do something a little bit different. At the same time, it was never as bad as it seemed in 2024 because, yeah, against Ohio State, you didn't see a lot of separation. You didn't see a lot of receivers running free. It just didn't happen. But other times during the year, you did have that, and there were blocks that weren't being made. Early in the season, Nico wasn't as accurate. We saw a lot of drops from receivers. You know, maybe a running back messes up in pass protection, or a tight end. I mean, or a hold. You know, how many holds did we see from John Campbell away from the play that wiped off a 15-yard gain, like a scramble or a run, a screen pass that would have got the chains moving and built some momentum, and all of a sudden you're punting because of that hold. I mean, it was just so many little things like that, and it's frustrating, and that stuff has to get cleaned up, and it's on coaching, it's on players. I mean, that's everything. Everybody's got to take responsibility for that. But it was just it wasn't like they're just locking Tennessee down and they can't find anything open on the field. So it's a combination of the execution has to be better, the coaching points, whatever you got to do to fix that, the concentration, I don't know. That's got to be better. And the scheme, obviously, there's got to be wrinkles. There's got to be some stuff that Heupel, brings to this offense. You've got to use the middle of the field more. You've got to use running backs in the passing game more, I think. You just got to be more creative with your routes. I mean, a lot of these plays, because of these wide splits, you're using half the field. And the defense can focus on half the field, and that's so much easier to stop. I mean, stuff like that has just got to evolve, or you're not going to beat SEC talent. You're not going to beat elite talent. So it's all that, and I think Heupel, he has to know that. He has to know it, and I don't think it's a Butch Jones empty promise situation that he's making to Matthews or Nico or whoever. I think there will be changes to this offense made this offseason. And, we'll see what that looks like next September when they take the field.
Yeah, it's the form that's going to take is what I'm truly interested in, because the guy's not going to fire anybody. I don't think. He never has. I don't think he will
either.
Yeah, I just I don't think he's going to do that for whatever reason, and I say that as a criticism in some sense, but also, he has a very good staff culture, and he gets when he has good guys, they stay for a long time.
Yeah,
and that's worth something. So it kind of goes both ways. But if you're not going to get rid of Halsley, and you're not going to get rid of Kelsey Pope, and you're not going to get rid of Glenn Ellerbe, what's going to change? I that's just where I go.
The thing with
does that?
Yeah, it does, but
it's
I don't think it's so black and white though. Obviously, those positions have to be better. At the same time, a year ago at this time, Alabama and Georgia both tried to hire Kelsey Pope away from Tennessee, especially Georgia. He coached Jalen Hyatt in 2022. He's recruited well at that position. Something's got to be better at that position, but at the same time, I don't think it's just like, oh, this guy's horrible, we've got to shove him out the door. Halsley's recruited really well with quarterbacks. Ellerbe, got David Sanders. I think something else with Ellerbe, and I don't know, their evaluations I don't think have been very good at all these first few years with offensive linemen. And part of me wonders, Ellerbe, he's at Missouri with Heupel. I'm not sure his history before that. I think he was at Middle Tennessee some. I don't think he'd coached a lot in the SEC. And I think some of their evaluations on offensive linemen, I don't think they understood what they needed in the SEC. Like Rodney Gardner knows on the defensive side of the ball. He's an SEC lifer, 40 years in this conference. dating back to his time as a player. I think they just really missed on some of their evaluations on offensive linemen, and hopefully that's getting fixed. I mean, we'll see how this next class turns out, or the 2023 class. It's too early to really, or the 24 class, I guess. It's too early to judge some of those players yet. You know, we'll see if they get on the field how they play. But I think that was a big part of that, and that's you gotta be better at that. I mean, I'm not making an excuse for them, but fix that and let's see where it goes from there. In my opinion,
Yeah, Ellerby, I did look. He's an MTSU guy, and then like played there.
I think he might have had like
there.
a GA year at LSU or something, maybe in the mid 2000s.
He did, and he was at Missouri with Heupel for 2 years. So he spent that much time, 2015 and 2016. But I, for the most part, it has been at that, one step down kind of level. I think it's a fair point, but the fact is this: whatever it is, you got to fix it. There's not an option, because what will ultimately happen, even if you continue to keep Tennessee at a 10-win level, is that bad? Absolutely not. But Georgia did that with Mark Richt. Mark Richt got fired. Like, eventually, that runs threadbare because you're not winning the big one. Like, it eventually becomes, oh, we reached the playoff. Well, how about we make it to the semifinal at least instead of losing in the first round or whatever? Like, that, everything's relative. And yeah, I don't think Josh Heupel is ever going to be a Butch Jones or a Jeremy Pruitt for sure. But this is a pivotal moment to me because he's being pressed by his own players, apparently, to change things. Obviously pressed by the fans because of what we watched. At the end of the day, they were the number 15 total offense in America this year, and number 13 scoring offense. Is a little skewed because of some of the games you played against. Yeah, you scored 70 against Kent State, but still, it wasn't a bad offense. You beat Alabama, you won at Oklahoma. You did plenty of stuff to reach the playoff and do all of that. Like, it wasn't.
No, I'm not down bad on. Yeah, I'm not down on. Yeah, I'm disappointed. I think we're all disappointed, but we're not down on him.
But the fact is, it wasn't bad, but it has to be better. And it's a complicated thing. And how does he do that without making any changes at all? I don't know. Well, the big thing, you can upgrade your players. And I think if your starting rotation of wide receivers is Mike Matthew, Braylon Staley, and Chris Brazzell, you've upgraded probably that just in general, depending on how Staley comes along. And
he just got kind of thrown out there now at Ohio State game with Nimrod and Webb leaving and Squirrel getting hurt.
Made a catch.
He really didn't play much at all during the regular season. And you've got some really good, talented receivers coming in too. I wonder if the Matthews
Travis
deal, specifically Travis Smith and Rodarius Jackson. I wonder if the Matthews deal, which is funny that you heard it about Matthews. We never really talked about Staley that much, and he wasn't rated as high, but he's a pretty high ceiling player. You stole out of South Carolina's backyard. I wonder if all that changes Heupel's approach a little bit with playing freshmen, because clearly that's something that's happening across college football at this point. And that makes it difficult. That makes it even more difficult to coach and recruit and to navigate the portal and keep your roster intact. Is these high profile guys come out of high school wanting to play right away just because they see Jeremiah Smith doing it. I mean, Jeremiah Smith, we'll see how his NFL career turns out, but from the looks of his true freshman season, you see like, okay, that's what we saw from like Calvin Johnson, Adrian Peterson, Leonard Fournette, those types of players in their true freshman season, especially like Peterson and, Megatron, Calvin Johnson, those go on to become Hall of Fame caliber players. That's a generational guy. Not every high school freshman is going to come out being that guy. Jamar Chase didn't put up insane numbers until his sophomore year at LSU. Justin Jefferson, same thing. I think it was his junior year when he really, really broke out there with Burrows. So, I mean, sometimes it's like it takes a couple of years, but these players expect that. Whether they're ready or not, it's like they expect that. Does Heupel push a Travis Smith out, into action a little bit quicker than he would have a couple of years ago because of this. I think that's something that'll be interesting to watch. And, maybe that's a good thing ultimately. Maybe you get your more talented players on the field. I don't know. I mean, you keep hearing the same excuse of, well, it takes a long time for players to learn this offense. Well, I think it's on Heupel to figure out a way to get those guys involved in. If that means adjusting your offense somehow, that's what you're going to have to do, and you're going to have to figure it out. Other guys are figuring it out around the country. You're getting, you might not be Ohio State talent, but you're one of the top, 15 talented teams in the country at this point, probably. You got to figure it out.
I did just look. Justin Jefferson was a 3-star player out of high school? I didn't know
he
that.
wasn't supposed to. I mean, Jamar Chase was I don't know if he's a 5-star or not, but I don't think he was the top guy in that class.
Yeah, I mean they did that team came out of nowhere for a reason, but
they made them different in Louisiana. I mean, Neighbors,
yeah.
Brian Thomas, the list goes on and on. That's a receiver country down there.
Yeah, he was a Louisiana guy, but this just feels like a fork in the road. It's kind of like with Tennessee baseball and Vitello. You had a moment similar to this. You made the College World Series and you lost. That happened multiple times with Vitello, where you were like, okay, we're right there, but when is it going to be going over? And then, 2022, you had the best team in the sport. One of the best regular season teams of all time in the sport didn't make it to the College World Series. Sorry, didn't make it to the College World Series that year. And, you're kind of going, all right, we're really good. Like this, we have a special thing here, but when is it going to be taken to that final level? And obviously Vitello did that. He won a national title. Can Heupel do that here? And I think it's not, you don't need to reinvent yourself. You just have to do those things that take it to that level. And I just, right here, the main thing that you could do for yourself is getting dudes. You elite guys. The transfer portal through high school, whatever you got to do, it's elite guys. And David Sanders, that's great. You need elite guys on the offensive line. You got one. And, wide receiver room, hopefully Mike Matthews can become that guy. Nico, elite guy. Hopefully, if he continues to develop, elite guy at quarterback. Fine. They're sprinkled through here. But can that turn into elite play? We'll see. It just feels, like I said, it feels like that fork in the road where, again, I don't think with Heupel it's ever going to just nosedive. But he just might. Right here, does he have the chutzpah, whatever it is, the gumption to make the changes he has to make? So many of these coaches are so hard-headed, man, and they, the infallible system of Butch Jones. We saw that in action, and oh my gosh, what a disaster that was. And so just don't have a moment like that. Just keep getting guys, keep adapting, and it's there for you. Tennessee has the resources to do this. Like, take the bull by the horns and get us there.
We spent all this time talking about the offense and changes that might happen or might not happen on that side of the ball. The defense is where the changes might happen this offseason, and that was your best unit outside, the Ohio State game notwithstanding. That was your best unit in 2024, and your defensive coordinator's contract expires January 31st. Your special teams coordinator and outside linebackers coach, Mike Eckler, and your cornerbacks coach, your secondary coach, however they label Willie Martinez. What happens there? There's a potential for some major changes, and Tim Banks, you're hearing Clemson's going to make a run at him. Now, personally, I wouldn't understand that move. You see this in professional sports all the time when agents float names out there and schools and try to, maybe get your client a raise. Maybe that's what's happening here. But if you're Tim Banks, you're this close to a head coaching job. And he's, how old is he? Like 52, 53? Maybe. I mean, he's once you get into the late 50s, it's hard to become a first-time head coach.
53.
Like yeah. So his window is coming up very soon where he needs to make that jump if he's going to do it. You go to Clemson to start over. I mean, that's going to take you a couple of years, I think, because it's not just going to flip, I don't think, in year one there. So that's not a move that just makes sense to me. You've got this culture. You've got this defense moving in the right direction at Tennessee. You've really got some momentum on that side of the ball, especially with some players like high-profile players now. With James Pierce going to be a likely first-round pick once he declares for the draft, and Jermod McCoy, Boo Carter, Arian Carter developing into a really good player, and some other defensive linemen. I wouldn't understand that at all. But if it does happen, what do you do? I mean, there's no it's a reset for Tennessee on that side of the ball if that happens.
A big defensive name just became available for for Tennessee. Gerard Mayo got unceremoniously fired by the Patriots. Obviously, an alum, first of all, Tennessee, and then a longtime defensive guy at the NFL level. But I don't think that's going to happen with Tim Banks and Clemson, because, I mean, maybe it does. Money talks. Who knows? The guy's making $1.5 million.
And he did get a
Google.
So Adam Sparks reported, and Brent Hubbs talked about this a little bit last week when he was on 104.5 The Zone with Ramon, Kayla, and Will, is that, he went into this season as a lame duck coach. And, my speculation, because I've always said, like, the perfect situation for Tennessee, something that I think could really take them to the next level, is Brent Venables gets fired from Oklahoma. He comes to Tennessee, and that's when the program takes off. Like Clemson, I feel like Tennessee is so similar to Clemson in a lot of ways, and Dabo had these years before Venables and before he made his OC change as well, where they were almost there. They were Clemsoning was the thing. They'd lose a big game or two, and that's kind of what Tennessee's kind of stuck in right now.
Yeah,
and Venables would just make perfect sense, because maybe he would go back to Clemson depending on the situation. I don't know, but he has a lot of respect for Heupel. There's a long history there, right? So I think that would be a natural fit, and I think Knoxville would be a good place for him. That's the dream scenario, and that could be in play after next season, because Venables is entering this season squarely on the hot seat, and he was almost there. If they don't beat Alabama, that could have happened this year.
I think he does get fired.
Yeah, and you wonder if Banks, it's like, well, he was doing such a good job. Even 2023, he did a good job. Why do you not go ahead and extend him? Maybe that was the line of thinking. Adam Sparks reported that he got an extension offer late in the season. That would indicate, like, once it became apparent that Venables wasn't going to be available, then you give Banks the extension, which he has not signed yet. Brent Hubbs suggested that was bothersome, I think is the word that he used to describe Banks not getting that contract extension going into this season. So I feel like that's probably the scenario there. Banks is out recruiting for Tennessee right now. He's still under contract till the end of the month. I'm like you. I think it gets resolved and he sticks around, but that is an odd situation.
It is interesting, and maybe just that little bit of bad blood or whatever you want to call that does send him to a Clemson. But I don't know. I just think he makes a ton of money relative to a coordinator at Tennessee, and
it'd be a strange career move.
Might be speaking out of turn. Clemson's a sinking ship, man. Like, that's not going anywhere. Dabo refuses to use the transfer portal.
He did finally get like one guy, I think.
He did.
And so it does feel like he's doing what he can to hold on. And a lot of times you start firing coordinators, unless you're Alabama, how many coordinators is Georgia firing? I know they want them to fire Mike Bobo right now, but typically those guys are leaving to become head coaches. Yeah. Like, that's when you have a healthy program. That's what you want. You don't want to lose anybody if they're good coaches, but you don't want to have to fire anybody. And it feels like Dabo's kind of in that. I mean, I think he fired an OC the year before last. I mean, he's just trying to get, do whatever he can to hang on there. And so, yeah, I'm with you. That would be a strange move for Tim Banks, I think. Now, Eckler could leave and go to Nebraska. There's those rumbling. Will Compton wants that to happen. They're close, and they just fired their special teams coordinator. Willie Martinez could retire. We'll see. It wouldn't be a surprise to see changes at either one of those positions, but and I think you could survive that and be fine. Banks is the one that then you're heading for a whole reset, because who knows who leaves then? Does Rodney Gardner peace out and retire? I'm not going to go work for a new guy, or It's I don't know.
But to that point, I think the only changes that you'll see are if the coaches leave, and Heupel is forced to change somebody. He's not firing any of that offensive staff, in my opinion. And yeah, it's the same with the defense. I would say the defense had such a good year. Personally, I don't think there's really any real reason to fire any of those guys. And I was a big fire Willie Martinez guy in the past, but they stepped it up this year. They had a way better year.
They played some younger guys. I mean, that's amazing what happens when what we've been saying, and well, not just
they
us,
adapted.
Fans, everyone's been saying, play some of these young guys, and it took those Tamari McDonald and some of these other guys leaving the program, Danico Slaughter, and I'm not throwing shade at them, but you had more talented guys behind them, and you play a Boo Carter. Boo Carter was ready. Like, he was ready to go play as a true freshman, and he's going to be even more ready next year because of that.
And a lot of people have been making parallels with this wide receiver room situation where last year you really, not necessarily your own choice, but the DB room cleared out. You just, all of those dudes transferred away or left, aged out, and you got a whole crop of new guys, and it was good. It was genuinely very good for you. And so maybe a complete clean out of the wide receiver room, it actually helps you to whatever extent. We'll see. If it's anything, I think it will be the prompting by your Mike Matthews and your Boo Carter to Heupel to go, hey, let's do something different on offense. If anything truly moves it along, I think it'll be that. But I think getting fresh blood in these key spots, I think could be good.
That's the other thing we didn't even mention real quick is Boo Carter likely seeing time on offense now. That was part of that conversation with Josh Heupel. It was something they talked about in recruiting. You throw him into the mix too. We know he's a dynamic player. How do you utilize that in the offense next season? Is that part of the changes? And I think that's a good point about pushing some of those receivers out, like Brew McCoy. I love Brew McCoy. He was a great player for Tennessee, great ambassador for Tennessee, great in the community. I'm not going to say anything bad about Brew McCoy, but he didn't have the speed necessarily and the shiftiness that you needed. And I don't know if he was ever quite at the same level after his injury against South Carolina, which is, I mean, it's terribly unfortunate. I hate it. Everybody hates it. But, Mike Matthews is going to play more because of that. Mike Matthews is the superior talent. Braylon Staley is the superior talent to Square White. So hopefully you're right there. And it is kind of like that DB room where it allows that position unit to really take a step forward next season.
I hope so. We'll see. But you do need, at the very least, you need some depth pieces like Amari Jefferson. You got to get something there. And so we'll see. It's obviously a huge conversation when it comes to the transfer portal and everything there. Before we finish with some basketball talk, Zach, anything else with football this week that's worth a convo?
No, I think that's about it. I think that that shellacking of Oregon by Ohio State probably made everybody feel a little better about the state of the team. It's just like, hey, sometimes you run into a juggernaut. You weren't the best team in college football this year. You weren't. And that's a big debate, but right now it feels like it's Ohio State. Like right this moment, whatever happened against Michigan and earlier in the season, that's in the past. Right now, Ohio State seems head and shoulders above everyone.
They're about to win a national championship, I think. And as gross as that is, I don't want Ohio State to win a national championship, believe you me. In fact, that kind of makes me ill. But they're so good. They're just so talented. And when the coach gets out of the way, oh my gosh. Like, just freaking throw the ball up to these 6-star guys you got. You idiot. Yeah. Freaking give it to them. You dummy.
That name brand is the dumbest thing ever. And the one other thing is, was this the first time you can remember pulling for Notre Dame? Because I feel like Notre Dame's been so hated, and we've thrown so much shade at them, but everyone outside of Georgia was pulling for Notre Dame in that game.
Yeah. I tweeted, it was a controversial tweet over the weekend, but I said something like, somebody needs to tell Big Ten fan bases that every other fan base in the SEC wants to see Georgia lose. Like, you think that I am going to choose Georgia over Notre Dame or like, no. I hope Notre Dame beats Georgia by 80. Now, next game, they play Penn State. That's kind of one of those, like, can they both lose sort of situations, I guess. I don't really care who wins that one. But, and also, I don't think either of them can beat Ohio State, so it doesn't even matter. But, in that scenario, freaking, I want Georgia to lose 100 out of 100 times and by 100 points. Like, no Notre Dame fan has ever barked at me in my face.
Yeah.
Like, that takes precedent. I'm sorry. But it's tough to explain that to Big Ten fans, and they weren't buying it. They were like, all you guys, you just conference superiority. Blah, blah, blah. And I'll say this. It is sort of two things. The SEC is the best conference in college football, even this year. It's hard. I know they don't want to believe it.
They're the deepest,
even this year,
without a doubt.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's not two teams like the Big Ten. The Big Ten is two teams. That's it. Mm-hmm. And you had 5 teams that went 9-3 and could have been right there. Now, Alabama was probably the biggest pretender of them all. Thank God. What a blessing that was. But it's the best conference. And also, I want Alabama to lose every game and Georgia to lose every game and Vandy to lose every game. South Carolina to lose every game. It was hilarious to see South Carolina lose. Like, they can all take a long walk off a short pier.
And so, Ole Miss doing their victory lap after beating a Duke team that didn't even have their quarterback. That was Lane has not stopped tweeting about it.
Oh, Lane! So many tweets from Lane. So many. Boy. Well, let's go move on to the number one team in college basketball, which, of course, is your Tennessee Volunteers. They got a huge game coming up. Let's talk briefly about it, Zach, before we bounce out of here. And we'll do that right after I tell you about Farm Bureau Health Plans. Farm Bureau Health Plans have been serving Tennesseans for over 75 years. Much has changed in Tennessee over the years, but some has stayed the same. Farm Bureau Health Plans has always valued personal relationships, especially when it comes to good health and good service. Plan on Farm Bureau Health Plans for health, dental, and vision. For better coverage, better rates, and better service, go to fbhp.com/ATOZ or walk into one of their 200-plus locations across the state of Tennessee. That is fbhp.com/ATOZ. Farm Bureau Health Plans. Go get yourself a health plan. Farm Bureau. So, Tennessee basketball, your number one team in America. They had a big game against Arkansas on Saturday. John Calipari coming in, former player Jonas Adu coming in with them. And to that point in the season, Arkansas hadn't been a world beater, but they were ranked 23rd, I think, coming into that game. And that one was over before it started. Like that one was over in the locker room before the game. The crowd was crazy. Obviously, I had a little bit of mixed feelings about them booing Jonas Adu on every single time he touched the basketball. Yeah, I like Jonas Adu. I did. I mean, I get it and I don't, but it's not like he didn't pull a Gerald Mincy and leave and talk crap about you all off season. Like, he didn't do any of that. I mean, whatever. And frankly, Felix Okpara is probably an upgrade.
Oh, yeah, yeah. That's the thing, is him leaving allowed you to upgrade.
Exactly.
To be a better team.
And in terms of rebounding, oh my gosh, Igor Milicic, the basketball finds this man. He's like a magnet. I don't 18 rebounds.
That's
18
insane.
Rebounds. Yeah, in that game, like I said, it was over before it started. They just smashed Arkansas, and it was a ton of fun to this point. And I don't know. Obviously, this is finally the point where a lot of Tennessee fans finally, okay, we can transition over to basketball season. To this point in the year, Zach, how are you feeling about this basketball team?
I mean, they've exceeded my expectations. I think they've exceeded everyone's expectations. We spent the early part of the year and really before the season started, probably even going back into the end of last season, talking about how you can't put too much stock into some of these November and December games if you lose a couple of those. And because in college basketball now, there's so much parity, and the portals hit that sport as well. It makes it really even more impressive what Tennessee's doing, because you're growing up in the 90s. early 2000s, it seemed like you saw more teams like this that just jumped out. It was like, that's the team to beat, kind of like they're dominant. And it's been a little, man, we don't see as much of that anymore, at least not in the same way. So it's kind of a throwback in that sense. But it feels like Rick Barnes is really, it's just a really good team. I mean, it might be the best team he's had. But he's really figured out a rotation with this team and the way that they've gelled that I just didn't see it coming like this. Chaz Lanier obviously is a huge part of that, and he's been everything you could have dreamed that he would have been. I mean, I think if he's coming in here scoring 15 points a night, you'd be pretty happy with that as a transfer addition, but he's went above and beyond that and really filled that void as much as anyone could of Dalton Knecht leaving. And it just gives you so much depth to have that kind of guy. Like Jordan Gainey didn't have a great shooting night. I mean, Jordan Gainey was huge. What game was that?
Illinois game.
Yeah. So I mean, he's been huge for you in games. Wasn't that good against Arkansas. He just wasn't making shots, and it was okay. Like you still won by 24 points. I mean, that's what championship teams have. Like you don't have just one guy that you absolutely have to rely on. And Gainey can be that guy when he's on. Lanier's there. Most nights it's you got Akpara playing defense the way he is, and such a presence there. That was one thing that you always felt Tennessee was missing last season. And then the rebounding that you mentioned, Milicic is just, I mean, above any expectation you would have had there. Again, I mean, it's talked about the portal additions, and Rick Barnes is really these weren't guys that came in and were just huge names. Like they nailed the evaluations and they knew exactly what this team needed. And it's been really fun to watch them come together so quickly, and to really, it's not like he's trying to mix and match all these different combinations. Like you've kind of settled into what works. I mean, you're kind of running like about a 8-man rotation, 7-8-man rotation at this point, and it's really working. And that's what the best teams are able to do.
And you're doing it all without JP Estrella, who, I mean, your depth piece right now for a big man is Cade Phillips, and JP Estrella was,
he had some good moments.
No aspersions on Cade Phillips, but JP's he's better. He's a better basketball player. And you're doing it without him. Cam Carr transfers in the middle of the season for some reason after he gets injured. Who knows what went on there?
Yeah.
But you're doing it without those guys, two depth pieces that you thought that you were going to have, and suddenly they're gone, and you are still this good. And I do, even in this form, without two of your best, or two your best depth guys. I love the way this team is built. Just the general balance. Like Lanier is not the every level scorer that Dalton Knecht was, but he's doing exactly what you need him to do.
Mm-hmm.
Just at every turn, if the scoring slows down and you just, here comes a 4-minute drought, give that man a basketball and let him just put up a 3, and suddenly, he scores 8 straight points and you're right back in this thing. Like he's just electric like that. And he's a better scorer than I thought he was going to be. Like I don't want to say anything negative because I think when the season started, we were like, well, he's not the kind of driver. He's not the this and that. Maybe, but he's really freaking good. I mean, he's one of the best backcourt players in America right now. And that's what you have as kind of your foundation. And then Zakai Ziegler, 5th-year senior guy. He has a tough time creating a shot because he's so short, but he's one of the best facilitators in the league. Just in, let's see, in that game, 7 assists in that Arkansas game, along with 12 points. When his shooting is on, he's awesome. Jordan Gainey has gotten so much better. So much better. He's better than I ever thought he was going to be. And then you move into Felix Akpara, who's crazy length and plays great defense. Struggles to score the basketball, but he put up 10 against Arkansas. It's not bad at all. And then Igor Milicic, who, if this man figures out, he's in his shooting slump a bit, but if he figures that piece out and gets out of that shooting slump, he's one of the best players in America. When you watch him play, like I said, the ball finds him under the basket with rebounds. And then he's the most obvious, people are going to go to like a Dirk Nowitzki, like that's sort of just, he's tall, creates a shot, fun offensive player, also good on defense, plays super hard. Like you just have a really fun set of guys that compared to last year really bring a little more balance. More than just, hey, Dalton Connect, go give us 40. And hopefully that does it. When it did it, it did it all the way to the Elite Eight last year. But it's just much more of an actual balance. And you're finding like contributions out of like a Darlin Stone Dubar, who frankly I thought was going to probably do next to nothing this season. And turns out when he's putting in minutes, he goes out there and gives it his all. And I like what you're finding out of this team. And I haven't seen another basketball team outside of Auburn, Duke, maybe, some teams like that. I haven't seen another team where I just go, oh yeah, on any given night, they could definitely beat Tennessee. Like I don't see it. You are at worst the second best team in the SEC. And it would just be behind Auburn, who, they're playing lights out too. Alabama's really good. You could make an argument there, but I'm always skeptical of Nate Oates' play style. It's sort of like you either make a ton of threes or you lose. And I'm always kind of skeptical of that. Bruce is similar, but he also has he has the best big man in America this year. So I don't know. It's going to be a lot of fun. Now, their first truly massive test is tomorrow against Florida. I really like Florida's team. They have really impressed me after that goofy stuff that happened with their coach in the preseason.
Oh, yeah.
I don't necessarily want to go into it. You just go look it up, the weird things that he was accused of. But you go to Gainesville, a place that has been a house of horrors for Tennessee basketball. And the last time you won, I guess, was with Grant and Admiral back when. I would say I don't know. I don't want to say this because I have nothing but positivity for this basketball team. I think you probably lose tomorrow night. It's going to be a raucous environment. Florida's a really good basketball team. You've had a really tough time winning there. You lost there last year, if I'm thinking correctly, or at least you lost there last time you played there. And so you probably lose that one. But if you don't, that might be the best win that any team has in America this season.
Yeah.
So they're the number 8 team. It's the top 10. It's number 1 versus number 8. It's top 10 matchup. Huge game. Florida has a great backcourt. What's that foreign kid that they have? Who is it? I can't find it. But they have a fun roster too, and they did get beat by Kentucky over the weekend. But it's, who am I thinking of?
Which is always annoying to play a team after a loss, especially after a conference loss.
And they're probably going to be motivated and I don't. Yes, it's Chinezlu, however you say that. He's a Nigerian guy. But this game's winnable for Tennessee, and I think if they win it, you have one of the best wins in America all season to this point. You'll obviously be, top team in the SEC, stay at number 1. It's a fun opportunity, and hey, just go out there and play. Was it Gonzo Martin that used to say this? Play the way you're capable of playing.
It's true, but it is very coach speak.
Very coach speak. But if they do, they'll win this basketball game. Just go and take it just like you did at Illinois, and it's gonna be fun.
Speaking of coaching, like Rick Barnes, how old is Rick now? He's 69, 70, 68.
Yeah, something.
I don't know. A couple years ago, we're all like, hey, he might retire, retirement watch, getting frustrated after some early tournament exits and all that stuff. You got the Miami coach, resigning in the middle of the season because of just how crazy the sport has become, and everybody, is kind of, I say, complaining about it, but it's been a dark time kind of for college sports when it comes to roster management. Rick looks like he's having the time of his life. I mean, I've been watching this guy since he's the coach at Clemson, back in the mid to late 90s, and he looks like he's having as much fun coaching. I mean, he's still Rick, but I mean, he looks like he's having as much fun coaching now as ever, and he's navigating all of this as well as anyone in the nation when it comes to the portal and managing rosters. And that's incredible because I mean he's truly a Hall of Fame coach, and to be able to do it still at this level is just incredibly impressive. I didn't give that guy enough credit years ago, and he absolutely 100% deserves it no matter how this season ends up. Incredible job, just amazing.
I thought it was going to be just a, end of career retread. Hey, we got back to the NCAA tournament. That's fun. That's great. And that was as good as it was going to get with Rick. And he has done one of the great career resurgences ever of a coach. This is as good as you will ever see. If he can top it off with a national championship, I don't know that you've seen better in college basketball.
Yeah, no, it'd be an amazing story.
Yeah, it truly. And I think I remember just in those early days of him coming here, like he said, he had kind of gotten, lost in the sauce, so to speak, at Texas, and it just phoned it in, and then has just totally found new life at Tennessee. It's absolutely insane. He deserves every bit of credit. And I think this team, as you said, it might be his best team ever. I think it's his most balanced team ever, probably. Those Grand Admiral ones were really, really good. And he made the Elite Eight last year. But, hey, really fun
just the
season.
Fact that the tough conversation is, evidence of what he's been able to do.
Yes, 100%. That's the show. I'm Charlie Burris. That's Zach Reagan. Thank you to everybody who tuned in. Who we got? Jared, Mr. Jones, Byron, Vince Vegas, Bob, Eric, David, Danny. It's who you are, GBO. Thank you for tuning in, watching, hanging out with us, being a part of the show, as you always are. I always say it, we couldn't do it without you, and I mean it every single time. Thank you. Go subscribe, do the things. You know where to find you. You made it this far, you know where we're at. Yeah, that's it. Thanks for watching, and we will talk to y'all next week.
See you guys later.